Daniel, you're on mute. So if you're talking to me, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was just hitting the go live button and getting the slides ready. So
Great.
now I will mute myself again and we should be good to go.
Wonderful. Great. So welcome everybody. We're really delighted to have everybody with us tonight for this very important topic. And I am not going to talk long. I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. We are partnering with the Wisconsin Council of Churches on the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign. This campaign is focused on voter education, voter registration, get out the vote, and also advocacy around voting rights. We are a member of the Wisconsin Voting Rights Coalition, which is how I first got to know our speaker, Ramaya Whiteside, and asked him to come tonight and speak to us about Unlock the Vote. So I really want to thank you, Ramaya, for agreeing to be here and to share your story and your work. But as we begin, I really want to start, as we always do, with some words of faith. We are two faith-based organizations, Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice and Wisconsin Council of Churches, and our voter engagement campaign is an interfaith campaign. So we always want to ground our work in our faith traditions and the values and the teachings of our faith communities. So I've asked Reverend Willie Briscoe to join us tonight and to start us off with a message of framing our topic tonight within a faith context. Reverend Briscoe is the immediate past president of Wisdom and also past president of Micah in Milwaukee, and is the associate minister of the New Covenant Baptist Church. And it's been my privilege to get to know him over the last year. He's an amazing voice for justice in our state. And Reverend Briscoe, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I would ask that everybody would bow their heads right now with me for one moment of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for allowing us to do this work, allowing us to represent the least of these, your children that need assistance, that need help, in a world that all needs prayer and that needs leaders and that needs leaders of faith. We want to thank you for allowing us to be your voice here on earth and to be your hands and your feet so that we can do this work of justice. These things I ask of you, and I count them all done. And in the name of Jesus, I say, amen. I hope to be inspirational without being too preachy. And I hope to be a little preachy without being too boring. But I'm here to speak for everyone when I say that the vote should never be a part of a punishment or retribution for any crime or anything. You should never lose your citizenship. Well, and this goes all the way back to the Old Testament. God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that man, in his quest for power, greed, and riches, would use his free will for selfishness and for things that were against the kingdom of God. The prophet Amos said, let justice run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. So we always want to provide for every citizen of this nation, as a matter of fact, every citizen of the world, to be treated as human beings and to be allowed that dignity and be allowed to make mistakes and recover, return, and repent of what they did. These are all qualities that God instilled in us, and he wanted us to follow. Jesus Christ, the human form and the representative of love itself, pure love, was about recovery, was about retention, was about everybody, the world upside down. That what we thought was power, that was weakness. What we thought was love was not really love. He loved unconditionally, and he gave power to the weak. Those things that everybody else called foolishness. But now we're in this age of pandemic. We're in this age of racial strife. We're in this age of prison reform. And we still look at some of the things that have troubled us all through life, the things that God preached against. That's why God started out being our leader. But man, in his selfishness and his greed, decided that he wanted to rule himself. And that's where we find all of the indifference, all of disenfranchisement, and all of that, the power rich and the powerful looking down on the poor. But now we have a chance to right all of those wrongs in history and to bring all of those things, those injustices back in line with justice. The right to vote, the right to be a human being, the right to take part in your family, the right to take part in your neighborhood, the right to take part in your community and in your country is not a right that you can lose because of a mistake. Those rights should be inalienable. Those rights should be guaranteed no matter what. And that's what we're here to fight for. And that's what God would have us to do, is to fight for the little person, fight for those, the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and especially those in prison, because prison is no more than a substitute for slavery. And I say that, and that is my opinion, mine only. You can agree with me if you would, and if you would or would not. But they are put in jail, and the main thing that they're there for is punishment. That was never the intent of restorative justice or restoring you back to the community. It was always there in order to let a person realize what they had done, recognize what they had done, repent of their ways, and return to society. It was not to strip them of their human rights. It was not to strip them of their dignity. But now we have seen that that's what we are doing to people. We are telling them, why can't you get your life together? But in the meantime, we've settled them with an anchor on their back, an anvil that they have to carry around. And we'll tell them, once you get rid of this anchor, once you get rid of this anvil, then and then only can you be a part of society. That is not what God intended. That is not what God said when he said he wanted you to never forget the prisoner, never forget those behind bars, never forget those who people sometimes forget and that sometimes look at as disposable. The right to vote and the right to participate in a community, in a country, in a society is an inalienable right that was given from God above. God never said anything about taking somebody's human dignity or taking their right to have food, clothing, and shelter. Everything that God provided for us was for all of us. And it was not to look down on anybody in this society or any other society. We were always supposed to lift each other up and restore each other and bring each other to a right relationship with God and with community. This is what we are intent on doing, and this is what we must do. We cannot let the rich, the powerful, and those in political theaters control how we treat the least of our people, how we treat those that have erred in society, and those who are just looking for a hand up and that's looking for somebody to fight for them. That is what we are here to do tonight, and that is what we are born for. I was not born for me. You were not born for you. You were born for the next person next to you. We are all designed to look out for each other in this society. And until we do that, we're going to keep having these disenfranchisement, this indifference, and this total disrespect of human life and character. That is why we must fight for the vote and fight for the rights of those behind bars and fight for those that are downtrodden and looked upon differently as human beings. Because no man under God's eyes is above another man, no matter his political lot, no matter his stage in life, no matter how he's achieved in life. We are all God's children. And we are all born with these inalienable rights, not by the Constitution, but by God's kingdom in heaven. And that is why we must not allow one person, any person, no matter what race, color, or creed, to be disenfranchised and looked at as disposable, looked at as less than a human being. All of our lives count. Every heartbeat that's on this webinar tonight counts, and everybody has a right, and everybody has a job to stand up for those human rights. Too long have we looked up down on our individuals that have been accused of a crime, accused of malfeasance, or anything against society, and we have been disposing of them and looking on them as different. No longer can we do that. No longer can we allow government to take away rights. No longer can we allow people to be marginalized. We must stand up, stand tall, and stand tough against this tyranny, because human beings are behind every one of these laws. Every one of these restrictions is a human being. And we must never allow something like this to happen again. I pray that what I've said has inspired some, has informed some, or even enlightened some. But I will tell you that this is the work that God has put on my heart. And I can tell he's put it on your hearts too, because it's 7 o'clock on a Monday night and you could be doing other things, but you saw fit to tune in and to be informed and to be counted in this fight. Let's restore voting rights to every individual behind bars, every individual that could be afforded to vote should vote, and let's count everybody in this country as human and as capable of recovery. And that is my speech for you tonight. I hope I have been clear. I hope I have been poignant, because I'm just now receiving my voice back. I had lost it for a while, but I hope that something I said inspired somebody. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Briscoe. We are very grateful that you have gotten your voice back, because you are an important voice in our community, and we appreciate your being with us tonight. So I want to introduce Ramiah Whiteside to you all. Ramiah is a tireless advocate for people in incarceration. He is the organizer for EXPO, Ex-Incarcerated Persons Organizing, and is going to talk to us tonight about his personal experience and his work to unlock the vote. So Ramiah, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you'll see we have slides up, and Daniel is running the slides for us. So whenever you're ready for him to advance to the next slide, just let him know. And yeah, and I will stop talking.
Okay, can you hear me? Sound check? Okay, good. So good evening, everyone. And I apologize for some of the technical difficulties I've had. Seems like the enemy just wants to throw stones and darts at you at every step of the way, every angle. So he diligently tried to thwart this tonight. You just wouldn't believe what has happened behind the scenes, behind closed doors. However, we've made it. Thank you, Reverend Briscoe. Thank you all for having me tonight. So again, my name is Jeremiah Whiteside. I am a directly impacted person. I am a community organizer for EXPO, which is Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing. And the topic specifically tonight is unlocking the vote, what that means. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, a little bit why that's so important to me, and how that aligns with exactly what the Reverend Briscoe was just sharing with you. So first and foremost, I thank a higher power. I thank God. I am a man of faith for allowing me to be with you tonight, to share my experiences, to still be alive, to share my experiences, to experience and enjoy a measure of freedom, to share my experiences. Because literally, just a stone's throw away from where I'm sitting right now is the institution where I was housed at, where I was incarcerated. So,
Ramaya, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a lot of background noise. Can you just be sure to speak up a lot?
okay, I will. Okay, so see if I can get closer to my mic. You guys are gonna see me even better. Is that better for everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I just gotta get closer to the mic. So again, I grew up native of Milwaukee. Grew up in the city of Milwaukee, and I was poor. We were poor from birth. So the standard of the day was survive. So it wasn't your typical Maslow hierarchy of needs of once you get to one, you get to the other, and you're better prepared to be a well-rounded individual, so on and so forth. Well, I come from a distressed demographic. The demographic I come from, the community I come from, voting actually was never important, never a priority. In fact, I didn't really understand and honor the significance and value of voting well off until I had realized my voting rights had been taken from me. So the first time I had an idea of how important voting was when my mom voted for the first time. My mom voted for the first time when she was past her 40s. And the reason why it took her so long to be able to vote is because she's also a directly impacted person. She also has a criminal background. She also has suffered from felony disenfranchisement. So the first time she was able to vote, well, and I can tell you who the president, not who she voted for, but who was running. Because Ronald Reagan was one of the people running, and he ended up winning. So my mom didn't vote for Ronald Reagan, but that was the presidency where she voted for the first time. And I remember we walked from our house. This was off of 19th and Burleigh. We walked from the house all the way around the corner, and there's only a few times in my life I've seen my mom just happy, beaming, from ear to ear, smiling. This was one of those times. I didn't understand what it meant. Like, so what? Who cares if you can vote? I'm a young teen, and I've got other things going on. Other things are my priority. I really didn't get it, because at that point in my life, I looked at voting like, who cares? It doesn't matter. They really don't see us. We really don't matter to them. And why are we even spending time going through this process? So I didn't appreciate just what that milestone meant at the time for my mother. I didn't appreciate what it would mean for me all these years later, when I'm ecstatic about the process. I'm ecstatic about our democracy. I'm heartbroken because now I know why she was so happy. Now I know why she was beaming with pride. It was directly connected to her redemption, her salvation, her righting so many wrongs in her life, her being authenticated, her being legitimized. She truly became a citizen past 40, even though she was born in these United States of America. So fast forward all these years later, and I did 25 years of incarceration where I studied our process. I studied our democracy. And I still didn't really know or appreciate the value of casting a vote. I'm very, very familiar with what we've paid, what the cost has been for us regaining the right to vote for women, or getting the right to vote for women, getting the right to vote from the civil rights legislation. I understand that because I read about it. It didn't hit me home until this last presidential election cycle, when, as a coordinator for the Relational Voter Program, which I was working for Wisdom and Expo, it didn't really hit me until I was going around the community and connecting with people, directly impacted people on the inside. I was encouraging them to participate in the voting process. I was encouraging the people in the demographic where I live to take an interest, because there's so many people out there who are eligible who think they're not eligible. So what we did, we put out an all points bulletin, the APB, to go into those demographics, go into that forgotten land that everybody's forgotten about, and look up under every nook and cranny or wherever, but shed some light on the fact that you can vote. And if you need more education on what that means, here we are. Here's Wisdom, here's Expo, let's have a conversation. So we did that for a year, and that program, the Relational Voter Program, the Integrated Voter Engagement Program, was so successful. I'm actually still doing it. I'm still a coordinator for that program. I still connect with the men and women currently incarcerated. They can't vote, but their people can. Their communities can. Their faith-based institutions can. Their mosques can. Their centers of worship can. So we're bridging that gap to say, would you please be an extension of our voices? So let me personalize it now. Again, why it matters so much to me now, this time going around. So I'll connect it to, if you can watch society or watch a community bask in the glory of citizenship, if you can watch them enjoy and embrace the privileges and the rights of not only just being American, not only just being a citizen, being a human being, being fully connected to your community, being fully connected to your neighbors, being fully connected to the process. I watched that from the sideline, wishing, praying, and asking myself, well, when will I get to vote? My case as a directly impacted person had nothing to do with voting. However, since I've been home over a year now, and legally, I will not be allowed to vote until I'm 68 years old. I'm about to turn 46. Legally, I will be excluded from our democratic process until I'm 68. So that's around 2041, 2042. And what I'm asking tonight for is for us to collaborate, build these partnerships, and ask our elected officials, is this right? It might be legal, but is this right? Because if you recall from the history buffs, the very fabric of this country, of our democracy, was based on this premise. We separated from England, we separated from across the pond, we separated from all that because we didn't appreciate taxation without proper representation. I pay taxes. I've held several jobs at one time since I've been home, currently on parole. My taxes are paid in full. I have questions. I have priorities and goals for my neighborhood, for my community. So disenfranchising me from being able to vote, this is what that does to me personally. If I have an issue with potholes or neighborhood security or the school system or who I would like to see as a superintendent, and we're gonna be electing a superintendent shortly, my voice doesn't matter. Who cares? I can't vote. So when I'm setting an example for my grandbabies and for the younger generation coming up in my neighborhood, they don't even recognize me as a fully legitimate citizen, because this inherent right is not mine. I cannot embrace it. It's still being excluded from me. So when we rebuild our communities, not only me, but 40,000 plus Wisconsinites who are also on some form of supervision, 40,000 plus. That's how many people this impacts, who are still out, they are working, they're paying taxes. Because they have that level of supervision, won't be allowed to vote. So I'm just one of many. Mine is 2042. You have other people that have to go 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. The majority of my colleagues who work within Expo, none of us can vote. And it's not connected to any criminal offense that we've ever had. So I got to thinking, why is this so important to keep it from us? Why does it matter whether or not 100 more people get a chance to vote, or 10,000 more people get a chance to vote? Like, what's really behind this? And so I got to doing some research. And I just want to share a little bit of that with you guys tonight. So one thing I noticed, and then could you bring up the first slide, please? Okay, so this ties right in with the history of it and how things get kind of skewed sometimes. The narrative gets different, like it goes through a different filter. And I'll just read it. If you guys can see it, it's up on your screen now. I'll read it. The Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. Like, this is all watered down. So first of all, they call them workers. Okay, to be historically correct, they were slaves. These people were traumatized, ripped from their homeland, and forced into a reality that they had to suffer, not for a few days, a few weeks or months or years, centuries. So let's let that sink in. It wasn't a form of working or employment where you can get unionized and you've got rights and benefits. No, if you didn't convalesce around or submit to what they were forcing you to do, you were killed. You were murdered. So let's get that historically in context. So then they also want to say, some people these days, with the next point, it says it wasn't about slavery. Oh, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War, it had nothing to do with slavery. Okay, what exactly was it about? From an economic perspective, historically, the southern states did not want to let that go. From a strategic standpoint, President Lincoln and his administration did what they feel they had to do to win a war, but also keep a country unified as best they could. So it exactly was about slavery. Could you bring up the next slide, please? I just want to share that kind of historical context where we've been so far away from it that now it gets watered down and some people don't want to hear about it. But here's a news flash for all of those people. While I do respect your position, we do respect your position, we are still suffering from what happened during that centuries-long institution called slavery. And so I'll read this one. It says, slavery was not the cause of the war between the states. This is connected to their irrefutable argument. Yes, it was. So I just wanted to give you guys that historical context of what I had to study and research of why this is so important that they keep this from me. Could you go to the next slide, please? So fast forward centuries later, okay, so we've gone through decades and centuries of a system that I encourage, if you all in the audience haven't studied this or haven't looked this over, in order to understand why this is so important to me and my colleagues, and all of the people on this webinar of the Faith Based community, in order to understand and to reiterate what Reverend Briscoe said, this right so many wrongs. This is the right ethical, moral, and spiritual thing for us to do, is to unlock the vote, because it should have never been locked in the first place. So this is me right after I was waived. And as you can see, I am not thinking about voting. If you would have told me in this caption at that time in my life what it meant, what voting meant and what that right meant and what I would actually lose, over 20 years later when I'm helping raise my grandbabies, or over 20 years later when I'm doing this work as an organizer, or over 20 years later when I want to go to these budget hearings, or I want to go to these get out the vote efforts, and I want to be a part of the very fabric of our society. If you would have told me then what I was losing or explained, I would at least put up some sort of a fight, I think, just because there was still some rebel in me. However, even when I was sentenced, they never explained why my voting rights were taken. So I want to share with you guys kind of my mindset at this time in my life after being waived at the age of 17. Before I could even legally vote, they took it away from me. So I guess at the bare minimum, at least explain what that means. At least explain or give me some type of measure where I can get it back. Like to this day, if you can go to the next slide, they've never really articulated or broken down what it means for me. So I did want to share with you with this slide what they did when I was released on parole. And this is the only conversation ever I've had about voting. Actually, it wasn't a conversation. It was a piece of paper, and they said, read it, sign it. So they never explained what this piece of paper said. So I read it. I mean, when you're being released, you read every piece of paper that is in front of you. They put your supervision rules in front of you, and you read everything, you sign it, you initial it. So I'll read it for you guys. It says, voter ineligibility notice and acknowledgement. So one of their priorities when I was leaving prison was to make sure that Remiah knows he better not try to vote. So they didn't say, I don't have another piece of paper that say I can't own firearms, or I can't go hunting, or I do have my supervision rules, but this is a whole separate document. So I want that to sink in. This is so important to them that they made it a whole separate approved piece of paper. This very rule could have been one of my many rules, my 20 plus rules, your supervision rules that you sign when you're released. Instead, it's a completely different document. Not only is it a different document, it's backed up by a statute. So here's what it reads, if you guys haven't already read it. This notice is to inform you that under Wisconsin state statute 6.03 subsection 1 subsection B, you are ineligible to vote in any election until your civil rights are restored. Now, I want you to let that sink in. Until your civil rights are restored. Legally, I really don't remember when my civil rights were taken. I was criminally convicted. I was never civilly convicted of anything. So that's just a misunderstanding. Maybe it's on my part, why I don't understand the legalese of what that means. So the same civil rights that were awarded or given to us back in the 60s by President Lyndon Baines Johnson, those same civil rights that people had to get traumatized and bitten and beaten and hit with bricks and bit by German shepherds, and they had water hoses sprayed on. These are those same civil rights that we fought, sweated, and shedded blood for. So somehow they're acknowledging that, well, we took those back. Even though you didn't know or appreciate that you had them, we're going to take them back. And we're not going to tell you when you get them back. So I'm going to read the next paragraph. It says, your civil rights will be restored when the department has determined that you have satisfied all sentences in terms of probation on all felony cases, and you are absolutely discharged from all felony cases. This will occur when you have completed all your felony sentences, including any terms of parole, extended supervision, or probation. So it can be a little bit confusing, but they're making it very clear that until we say so, don't even try it. You can go back to the back of the bus. You can go back to sharecropping. You can go back to being an indentured servant. You can go back into the abyss and don't come out until we tell you to. That's what that feels like. So I want to segue now. Could you bring the next slide up, please? This, and I do have my eyes closed. This was, I believe, the first or second day that I was released after doing all that time. I'm with my mentor, life coach, Jerome Dillard, who, man, I thank God for him. I thank God for all of you. I thank God for Reverend Briscoe. But as you can see, this was back in 2019, and the first time around that legislation was introduced for Unlock the Vote efforts, basically it was dead on arrival for different reasons. So that was at one of the events in Milwaukee where Mr. Crowley was there, and there was some good community support, but because there was no bipartisanship, there was nobody on the other side of the aisle, basically, that time around, it failed. So this time around, another purpose of having this event is to garner up support. And that's why I'm sharing my personal experience of why that means so much to me. Not just me, but so many others like me. As I said, over 40,000 current Wisconsinites who are in the same situation that I am in. And not only that, nationally, you have millions of people in the same situation who also are suffering from felony disenfranchisement. And here's one thing I will highlight. Why Wisconsin is last when we're pursuing efforts like this, I don't know. I won't even begin to debate that whole issue. I do know this. Iowa has done it. They have a Republican governor, and she did it via executive order. They have reinstated voting rights for convicted felons. I know that California has passed legislation. Maine and Vermont have actually never had to even pursue such legislation because people currently incarcerated can actually vote. So maybe they're doing something right there. And then statistically, there's no argument for or against, or there's no boogeyman for the states of Vermont or Maine from the fact that they allow currently incarcerated people to vote. Like, they have no empirical data of why that's bad, or, you know what I mean? So they can't argue against it. Why we won't follow that lead? Again, I won't debate that. What we can at least do is offer in this state, like 23 other states within our union, some form of reinstatement of voting rights. Now, what we want with Unlock the Vote is full voting rights. You're done with your prison sentence, day one, you should have your voting rights reinstated. Why? Because it's the next step of full citizenship. And that full citizenship is connected to the 14th Amendment, which encompasses all of us. So with the 14th Amendment, and I'll just cite it briefly, it says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. So as a citizen, as stated by the 14th Amendment, even though traditionally or historically this was not meant for Black people or African American people, we had to fight for this. All of us, white people, Hispanic people, African American people, Americans, we had to fight to extend the scope of the 14th Amendment, the equal protection clauses, the due process clauses. We had to fight to be blanketed under that protection. So it was not a given, because you had people who who, even though slavery was outlawed and it was banned, and then you had the Emancipation Proclamation, which President Lincoln ended up dying for. Even though you had that, like right after him, you had a president who went on the record saying what his beliefs were for white people in democracy. He basically said our government was only meant for white people, and as long as he was president, he would see to it that it would only be addressed to white people. That was Lincoln's successor. So that's a historical fact. So they also had the one drop rule, which again, I'm just going over things a little bit historically to help you understand my process, my filter of this. And with the one drop law or one drop rule, that means that one drop of African American or African blood negates you from the protections of the United States Constitution, because with that one drop, you're no longer considered a citizen. So we have all these different protections or safeguards or limitations barring my citizenship, me, born here. It makes me think, well, why? That's why Reverend Briscoe, Reverend Elwinger, Dr. King, and so many of our martyrs, so many of our pillars of the community, so many of our prophets, that's why they toed the line. That's why they put skin in the game. And that's why I too am committed to advocating for the restoration of these rights. And I hope to partner with you guys on this call and anybody out there in the community who see it as a human right, not just a civil right. It's a human right. As Reverend Briscoe said, it is an inalienable right. It's not a privilege. You've had some politicians go and say voting is a privilege. How say you? What do you base that on? So some opponents say that restricting my right to vote deters crime, and then they go on to argue that restricting my right to vote helps keep the community safer. So I asked myself, whose community? So we did we've done countless different panels and trainings and like town hall setups at barbershops and different places in the communities, of course, with socially distancing. And we've had elected officials come out, and I won't put names on them, but we've had Q&As and we've asked them, how do we get traction on this? Or, what's their position on this? And one of them, with the cameras going, they'll say one thing. But as soon as they get back in caucus, they put out hints or legislation that say, no, don't ever give Ramiah back his voting rights. And so it's that measure of being conflicted or being hypocritical or being two-faced or whatever, adjective you want to be on there, that I encourage us to filter through and figure out. Because if we collectively all believe in this, the restoration of these rights, then we can use our voting power to put people in place who will be great stewards of our money, great stewards of our laws, great stewards of our morality, versus the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde approach. So all voting restrictions and limitations all voting disenfranchisement does for me is restrict my ability to be successful during my reentry. It restricts my ability to be successful as the pillar of a community that I wish to be. That's all it is. It's not connected to any data that has any value that says, if you take my right to vote, it leads to this. They have no data to back that up. So again, it further negates my ability to embrace being a citizen. And that's something that I implore all of you to assist me with. And it's not just me. You have countless Wisconsinites who would also relish to have this ability back. And if you just think, just going back to the previous election, look at what we did as a state. Look at what we did as a country. We did the unthinkable. We did the impossible. It literally just happened. So just imagine what we could do, and it doesn't matter from one side or the other. Imagine what we could do when you have the restoration of these rights to a people who think they don't matter, you really don't care about us, you really don't see us, the system is against us, or this is just another version of some antiquated Jim Crow law. Imagine if you can reinforce that you do empathize with them, that you do want them to put their best foot forward, and you do want to support them in upward mobility through our systems. Imagine if by restoring these rights, you can right historical wrongs and systemic disparities and inequities that have been there for centuries. That's why this matters to me. That's why this matters to Reverend Briscoe. That's why this matters enough for all of you to get on this call tonight. So part of my legacy from the ashes that I caused is restoring these rights. So with my legacy, I can give something back to this community that's greater and is much more far-reaching than what I took. That's what I connect reinstating my rights to vote. That's what I connect reinstating the right to vote for so many well-deserving men and women of Wisconsin and men and women nationally. So there's no boogeyman behind this. There's no shady math that we have to worry about here. It's cut and dry. We restore these rights so we can restore our full citizenship. Case closed. That's what this is connected to. So it doesn't have to be a bunch of political pundits or politicians peacocking and telling you one thing over here only to do another thing over here. My zip code and reinforcing and reinvesting in that zip code in Milwaukee, 53209, 0612, any of those means I can go back to my community and bring the good news of you can now take part of a system that historically shut the doors on you. They slammed the doors on you. They sicked the dogs on you. They locked you up without cause, so on and so forth. Now I can go back as a prodigal son that I am, bearing the fruits of this, which should have been there from day one. Now it is yours. Let's bask in that glory. So that's what I implore you guys to do tonight. So, and if you think it's just a matter of, or just for Ramaya, I want to share with you something, why it should be just as important for all of you. I hope you guys can still hear me, and I do apologize for the technical difficulties. So here's why, and I'm going to be wrapping up shortly here. Here's why it's just as important. And I'm not sure if I have one more slide or not. If you could go to the next one, if there is one more. Okay, there you go. And I believe there's one more after this. So these are part of our like lit drops, and we share these all over the place just to get the word out. So you guys can read this for being short on time. I'll just allow you to read it. And then in addition to you going ahead and reading that, I want to also share with you why it's not just us or those who are impacted by felony disenfranchisement, why it's not just us being targeted. So they have another bill out there, it's LRB 428. And what this voting bill would do, so Ramaya's taken off. The 40+ thousand Wisconsinites who are currently on supervision who can't vote, take that off your radar. But they're coming after you. You think they're just gonna stop with me? So with LRB 428, this is what it does. It would limit the voting rights for voters who certify as indefinitely confined. So your rights are going to be restricted just because you have a harder time medically or physically with getting to the polls. You committed no crime. I did. Okay, I'll give you that. Okay, and then they have LRB 1935, which limits the voting rights of nursing home residents or group home residents. Just because they're in an assisted living home or just because they're in a group home, they committed no felony. However, they're going to limit your rights. Okay, so I'm sharing with you all how if we don't coalesce behind this, if we don't have some measure of solidarity behind this, do you think they're gonna just stop with Vermaya? So you have LRB 1537. That's it. This limits the option to obtain and how you return an absentee ballot. Again, you committed no felony, but they want to limit your access to your government. And then you have LRB 2032, which makes it more difficult to vote via absentee ballot. So I'll close with this and with this call to action. Please, could you go to the next slide, please? I believe there's one more. Democracy needs everyone. That's a fact. So, and I see I just lost my camera there. So I think that means I need to wrap it up. See if I can get it back. Nope, it's gone. So those are my technical difficulties. So democracy needs everyone, because I just gave you an example. They're not going to stop with me. They're not going to stop with those 40+ thousand Wisconsinites who they've already disenfranchised. If we don't come together in some measure of solidarity, call your electeds, email your electeds, text your electeds. We have joint finance committee testimonies coming up. If you can't be there in person, or if they do that, if we have to do it via Zoom, Wisdom has an arrangement, Expo has arrangements to collaborate with you and get your voices and get your messages heard. So that's my ask for all of you tonight joining this. I would like to vote. I would like the people in a similarly situated position to also be able to vote, because this is connected to an inalienable right. This is connected to my very citizenship. And it also rights a wrong historically that should never have been there in the first place. So I'm going to wrap up. I don't know if we're going to do any Q&A or follow-ups, but here, and this is the last call to action, which we have important dates coming up. Tuesday, March 9th, we're going to be planning and practicing for testimony before the Joint Finance Committee. How to get your message across, how to do it in the correct amount of time. We do a very, very good practice around that. I had to go through the same training, and it helped me say all of what I just said in this past almost an hour in basically 2 minutes. So the trainers are very good at doing what they do. Saturday, March 20th, again, we have a preparation for Madison Action Day. It's similar to how to get your talking points together. I believe you can get a copy of those dates. I don't know if my information is on this, but you can go to the website, Expo's website. You can go to Wisdom's website, and all of this information is also on there. Tuesday, April 3rd, that's our final checklist for Madison Action Day. We basically go through, kick the tires, make sure we got everything going. The people signed up who are gonna go. We have certain jobs that they're gonna do, things like that. Okay, thank you. And then the last one is April 15th, which is Madison Action Day. That's where we go in full force, whether it's a hybrid of in-person using Zoom. We're going to go there and we're going to be your voice. I'm going. The first time I ever went was last year after never being involved politically. And I can convey it is one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had in my life. It's the closest I got to understanding why my mother's smile was just that big and bright. So that is it. I'm gonna give it back to you guys, so hopefully I can answer a question or two.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ramaya. Thank you for your passion, for your commitment to this work and all that you're doing, and for your willingness to share it with us tonight. If people have questions for Ramaya, please put them in the chat. Just let us know. We'll just take a couple of questions because I know time is running late. So Ramaya, I wanted, well, I'll wait and see if anybody, oh, somebody did write something. Ramaya, I want to thank you for highlighting the voter suppression bills that are being introduced into our legislature right now. My colleague at Wisconsin Council of Churches, Peter Bakken, asks, are there any bills introduced or in process that address any of the issues with felony disenfranchisement?
Okay, and right now, what we would like to see being offered is another version of Unlock the Vote. And what we're spearheading or advocating for is to have them introduce that again, even though the terrain is very similar to what happened in 2019. However, we want some type of legislation to be introduced, and then we can go from there. They're very hesitant to have it introduced because they don't want it to be dead on arrival again. So that's kind of where that is. There is a version of Unlock the Vote on deck. Whether or not they're going to introduce it, you know, it's up to the electeds or those who co-sponsored it to make that choice. If you guys could call them and advocate for them to introduce it and have us fight for it or advocate for it, that would be great.
Great, thank you. So I want to make sure that it's clear for everybody. You have served your sentence and you are out of prison and have been for over a year. Why is it that you still can't vote?
So the physical part of being actually inside of or behind the walls is done. I am currently on what they would consider parole or an early release. So I'm still under the jurisdiction or the auspices of the Department of Corrections. So it's like a furlough, an extended furlough. Mm-hmm. However, I'm expected to pay taxes and I'm expected to abide by all rules and all laws. So again, I can pay taxes, I just can't vote.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I'm just going to take a look really quick on Facebook and see if anybody on our Facebook page has asked any questions.
None on Facebook.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel.
I hope that means I answered all their questions.
Well, you gave a very thorough and very impassioned presentation, which we really appreciate. So as I said, oh, thank you. Ramaya just put his email address in the chat so people can be in touch with him and find out more about Unlock the Vote, more about the work of Expo and about the upcoming dates. It is so important that we all weigh in on the budget process on criminal justice reform and so many other issues that are in the budget. So please do take part in all the trainings that you can find with Expo, with the ACLU, with other organizations, with Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign around advocating for the budget, for things that we want to see in the budget, and also to continue to advocate for voting rights. As Ramaya was telling us, there are a number of voter suppression bills being introduced this week into the legislature, and we have to do everything we can to stop those and instead to promote bills that promote access to voting for everyone. So with that, Ramaya, thank you so much. Reverend Briscoe, thank you. We so appreciate your being with us tonight and sharing all of this with us. And thank you to everybody who joined us this evening to hear this presentation. Please share what you've learned with your friends and your communities and your congregations. It has been live streamed to Facebook, to the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign Facebook page and the Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice Facebook page. It will be up on the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement YouTube channel shortly. So please share the recording with other folks and help us to spread the word. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.